And actually also, how do people want to ask? What do people want to talk about? What was the most interesting thing? What was the thing that was made the most sense? What made the least sense? That sort of thing is really important. But I don't know whether you want to type them in is probably just as easy as unmuting and speaking. So knock yourselves out.
This is your time, everyone. No?
Or Nelly and I can just talk about
Everything.
boxing or
Yeah, I mean, well,
you still training?
yes, I am. I mean, it's it's a fight every morning, but I go, I do my 5K, then I do my push-ups, all of that. That's the only way I can maintain sane. What about you? I was thinking about that actually, because I remember you training with your micro shorts, these amazing micro shorts of yours. Where are these gone? We are not seeing them much anymore on social media.
I know, right? It's been a funny year actually. No, I like sort of dropped off on my running. Actually, we're doing quite good running recently. Okay, we have I'm going to share my invisible. Hi. So that's Fee, and that's Ginny. There's a very good chance that Ginny may shout. Yeah, well, she likes to protect us, so please forgive us if that kicks off. But right now, you don't really look like that. But yeah, I have been running, and then recently we've been stopping running. So I don't know. You know the issues. It's like I don't know what happens, and then suddenly you wake up and you go, huh, we haven't been doing that. That stopped, and I don't know why.
They closed the gyms.
Yeah,
yes,
I mean,
they did.
sport is a good one to maintain. I mean, if you can do I go around the house, I just, and then that's that. But we have questions from Patty. Patty, you have a question. Do you want to step up, unmute yourself? Don't be shy, everyone. It's an occasion to speak one-to-one with T, who is always finding the best way of advising in general. Okay, Patty.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, T.
Hi, Patty.
Hi. So I have two questions. Firstly, are you doing research or work directly to do with well-being? And be connected to that first question, where do artists fit in where the tech world is heading? Maybe they're big questions.
No, those are fine. I'm not at the moment, a lot of the, what am I doing? I'm not doing any research because I'm not very good at, am I not very good at? I don't tend to sit and realize I'm doing research. So my research practice generally revolves around the fact that actually I have no idea what I'm researching. It is much more kind of like a short-term passionate need to know more about this, that, other, and then I'm not, and it doesn't follow that. I know that some people like to research, as in they like to understand the structure of their research, and it is quite a kind of practical and formulaic thing, and that's actually how in school and university to kind of align to have a research practice, just like you might have a design practice, and to follow a number of steps through which you're going to explore an idea and explore different perspectives, and then come back round. And then there's also I think a school of thought which is first what should we call it, the important kind of source is primary sources. So actually, if you are interested in a topic, there's an argument for saying that critique or criticism is secondary to the primary source. So if you are, the things that I'm interested in, certainly from well-being perspectives, tend to be to do with what I'm very interested in what in when you are doing research, you have this kind of accidental double lens on things, because there will be people fighting to give you information, and there will be people fighting to sell you things, and those, that kind of parallel filtering, as you are basically there, and it's trying to understand more than anything the different we have moved on very much from this library world where you can go and find reliable sources. So you can't find reliable sources. You can only, in a way, find unreliable sources, and it means that every source has its own agenda and its own perspective and its own meaning. That's actually incredibly useful to know. It's almost just as fair as when it's like, here are the official people who know the official news, because it means that you can work through from different perspectives. I mean, even within sort of the pathology of well-being, you can learn from different countries will present their perspectives very differently, because they have different health services, or they have different billing models, or money. Basically, it's always ultimately about ideology or money. So there is no neutral perspective, and that being as it is, I find it very hard to do structured research, because I'm more interested in the things that are perverting the perspective rather than the thing itself, if that makes sense. So, I mean, having said that, like, yeah, we did do a project. I have done a number of projects on well-being. I find that the projects on well-being, and the curious thing about this is that sort of you too, as a designer with well-being, there's this sense of a solution. There's this sense of being that there is a problem, identify the problem, identify the solutions, prototype, design, prototype, like test, all of that kind of design thinking, ideally talk to the community whose problems you're trying to solve. And that is being solution oriented around issues like well-being lead to peculiarly static thinking, because different people's well-being comes from very different perspectives. Even the phrase is if I asked you all to write down in your language, like, of how you define well-being, you would probably use similar tropes, use similar language. So I think the artist's role is to challenge that. We're having an interesting time, because Mental Health Day or Mental Health Week or Mental Health Month, or whatever they want it to be, is coming up soon around the world. And I've been talking to Google a lot about how they understand the differences in the difference of audience. There are people whose well-being, like I'm sure most of you, for whom well-being is environmental. Your well-being is dependent on diet and exercise, on avoiding stress. It is as much up to you as it is to anyone else. So they are environmental causes, like the fact that we are all isolated is a peculiar environmental situation which is having an effect on people's well-being. However, there are also obviously large parts of the community whose well-being is completely is not quite so much in their hands. And so when we speak to one audience about the notion of well-being, we almost immediately ignore people for whom there isn't an okay. There isn't a kind of like idealized best. And that's the big problem with the tech world. So what you're really asking, that second question, is like, where do artists fit in where the tech world is heading? It comes back to that idea of what is the idea of a solution, the idea of a best, the idea of an ideal, the idea that anything has got a singular optimal perspective. There are correct answers. That's really the artist's role, where tech comes in, is to refute and push back on that idea. And it's very, very that there is an ideal, however good that might be for society. Like, it would be very nice if, yes, but if like we are all different. Like, what? Yet somehow we're all meant to meditate, or do mindfulness, or get the same amount of sleep, or not medicate our way through our lives, or have, I don't know, have the same sex drive. All of these things are very strange to me. It's very peculiar, because I think it comes from this thing of utilizing. You could actually, with the sex thing, it's kind of curious. It's like the Kinsey scale was fascinating, because it's the first sort of set of data around sex and sexuality, and yet it ended up being a guide to being normal. Just part of it was that I don't know how much you know about Kinsey, but it's totally worth investigating. Partly because it's just really fun. This is the sort of thing that's a research exercise. Just go and research heavily into sex research and sexology, and where it came from and why it happened. It leads to this. It leads to a space where difference exists, and it actually led to. It moved things from being stigmatized in the abstract into being stigmatized in a pathological sense. And then once they're labeled and pathologically stigmatized, then we have to move out of that into another thing. So that's what happens when we measure things, is that we basically make boxes for everything that we do, and we're doing that again and again. So well-being is now existing to me quite a static box, which I don't sit in, and therefore I am forever wondering about it. So thanks. It's a great question, mainly because that's a huge trigger word for both of us, I think. And
same here. That's, a quick follow-up question would be, how do you fight for the non-optimal then? Because there's so many of us, and it sucks when the world is saying all these ways of being, and it just doesn't really help.
Yeah. No, it's very difficult. It's like, it's very hard to, especially when they're well-meaning, like maybe it's a patriarchal thing. Maybe it's like that idea of hierarchy and how we've always been raised, that there should be people who lead us and give us commandments and tell us how to behave. When you get into, I don't know how much queer theory you've done with generally, but like that whole model, like I always like pointing out to sort of people in that space that it's not really queer theory if it's like if it's universally agreed upon, that kind of stops it being queer. It's no longer queer. That's not a queer approach. And yeah, it would be nice if people could understand that I don't know. Well, we could have a long conversation about queer theory, but really, if we're sticking to that idea of where tech comes from, it's really challenging. It's really challenging. I think it's just literally up to individuals to remind the world as artists that they have a place as an individual, and that they do not need to be part of the whole, whether that's a solution or well, it's getting harder and harder. Sorry, I've just been spending so much time at the moment thinking about the nature of the police state and how it evolves from where we are. Like this kind of constant surveillance state. We've got like these lovely tools that we're using in tech, and I'm doing a project with them in a way to go that this is to point at things and go, so there's a lovely thing called pixel ambient services. Not saying that any of you would want to pull out and point at a piece of technology which is quite extraordinarily named, but it's Pixel Ambient Services, and you don't get to choose to download it on your Pixel phone. It comes part of the Google package, and it could also be called Google Secret Surveillance, because it's doing all of the things in the background to give you this improved life, and it's incredibly useful. It's really wild, but as we find those things, especially as the ecosystems get tighter and tighter. So everyone with an iPhone, like that ecosystem is a controlled experience from Apple, and they will continue to make it a better experience. As these things get better and better, it becomes harder and harder to exist outside of those ecosystems. And we sort of all know that. Like, you can all see us battle with the tools that we have and what we know we're sacrificing. Anyway.
Key, you have another question from Michaela as well. Michaela, you here?
Okay, cool.
Hi.
There's more coming.
So yeah, you basically, I mean, it kind of could be interesting to also to continue drawing it from this one. But you mentioned in your last talk that we're beginning to exist in a world where information is existing all around us, but for some reason we're still relating to knowledge the way that we used to. And this really resonated with me. And I mean, I also remember that you spoke about integrating knowledge from theater into user experience design. And I'd be really, really happy to hear your insights or your fantasies on how humans could make sense of tech-mediated information differently. Maybe using principles from theater or environments.
Yeah, it's another curious thing. It's like, one of the weirdest things about all of these questions and like what we're dealing with, I suppose, at the moment, is that we're trying to move through from one place to another place. And in order to do it, you kind of have to, I guess it's like looking at early cars and going, oh, well, we can't have cars because millions of people will die. And they're incredibly, like, imagine if you invented a car today and then you took it to, I don't know, the government to say, we want to put these into production. And they'd be like, they're insanely dangerous. This is just going to kill people. And equally, like, they pollute the planet. So no, you can't have this. And maybe that would be a good thing, but actually, and it does sort of depend on your perspective on cars. I'm just picking that as a one-off. At the same time, it's a kind of like fundamental of our industrial ecosystem. So with the digital ecosystem and this idea of moving, like you say, how we create ways of what's the word? Kind of realizing, like, we want to, like, I don't like virtual, so I'm trying to avoid virtual, but creating non-tangible, like creating a tangible form of all of this non-tangible reality that we have, like all of this information, all of this noise, all of this sound, all of the information that we have, which is and can be really fascinating and rich and rewarding, but is also like way too much and too intense and terrifying and powerful. And you see that when you hear the people at the kind of the top of the field talking about it, you can feel how powerful what they have at their disposal, what is the potential of all these things, and what it is. So we are never going to kind of launch into that world willingly. You'll see, so in different cultures, the way in which the the tracking qualities of the COVID data is accepted very, very differently in different cultures. The there is not a best or worst. Like there are a lot of benefits to cultures that are not your own. I even, there are parts of American culture that I like, but the rest of it, not so much. And I find it amazing to watch. The same with China, the same with like Indonesia. There are even Australia, like, or the UK. There are parts of culture which you go, I don't understand why we do this. And I think with digital as well, it's like currently it's very dominated by us, an aspect, our culture, and therefore it presents a lot of its value systems are still, and a lot of the hardware that it produces and a lot of the kind of belief systems that it has are still very rooted in that culture. We still have a UX which is a visual UX rather than, and therefore all of the information we think has to be visual, which we know is not true because our world is not visual.
Right, exactly.
But we don't, our world is spatial and our world is audible, and to an extent it's olfactory, but like frankly all of the experiments I've ever seen with smell are awful, so I don't like that. But I know that that's a big thing for some people. There are lots of different ways in which we can do this. I don't know. I actually just did a document on this, and I'm slightly tied to the fact that there's things which we are working on, so I'm not really meant to talk about them. So I can't actually let loose on all the things that, my favorite fantasies, because I'm still in that kind of space. But one of the curious things about how Google employ me in a way is that, like, yeah, I'm allowed to do that. And none of it will happen because it's effectively like giving everyone their own nuclear generator. I mean, it might be really effective, but at solving the global power, like giving everyone in the world global power, but it would also have quite significant dangers. So I think we fiddle along. That's why I like doing the little experiments. That's why I think theatre and art are the best place to do these things, because you see these things. Like my new favorite thing is that we should have like global pandemics in which tens of thousands of people die, because like literally everyone is able to, like, this is just unthinkable. I've probably talked to more people about more ideas in the last month than I have in the whole of 2019. And I've been able to talk to more people as well. It's been really, really, really interesting for me just to realize that I had it all wrong. I don't know, it's hard to say, but anyway, that's what I think at the moment. Anyway.
You have a question from Gaspar. Gaspar, where are you?
Hey, T.
Hi, Gaspar.
Yeah, I hope you listen to me well. I have a question that is, maybe I read it and I try to fix it as I go.
Are you dressed up as a jacquard?
Jacquard.
When there's this Google project with a jacquard, what was it?
Oh yeah.
Like you look like you're dressed up with a carpet.
It's a bit like a pixel carpet. Look.
It's a pixel carpet.
We got glitching.
Anyway, sorry. So Gaspar, please. Sorry to disturb.
No worries. Okay. I was wondering about how the creative process works for you, or how do you see it as an entity? So between experimentation and innovation, I have this problem with the market or like the design as a innovation creation market almost, or like a moving force to trends. And therefore I'm wondering, like, how do you see the bigger impact of capitalism on our creative processes? Even when we're not working for capital, how do you see like innovation in general, or like creating something new? And how does this relate to your work, or like to, in general, the world? I'm trying to go a bit like
No, it's all right. I
Right?
think I'm pinned, like I'm lucky in, like I often think of myself as not really having a tether, of not having a place where I have to come back to, and being allowed to think openly. I do agree with your idea that there is like an innovation market, which is very frustrating because innovation is very often used as a um, sales point. So it's a point of sale thing, and you will be, you know, you need your innovative ideas in order to sell um, your day-to-day wares. I think every industry has those. Like it's like the fashion industry, which really runs on selling perfume and sunglasses, not ever on the clothes that they design, because that would be a ridiculous business model. No one is going to to buy those clothes apart from me.
2 days ago, there was a headline on Vogue that is called "Trend Forecasters Predict a More Trendless Future."
Yeah, really.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds about right. The Well, they're sort of. I mean, I don't know. Like what they're trying to say, I guess. What that whole idea is that if everything is immediately it's more of a fragmentation than an actual failure to um than the idea of a trend. It's just that like the trendless future really just indicates that we can't define the what do you call it, the demographics. Like, oh yeah, okay, so that's not what we're doing. It's like it's not that they're trendless, it's that it's not measurable. We still see trends. In retrospect, you can always see trends. Like 20, 30 years on, we can clearly see how things have trended in one direction or another. What's curious is that notion that we should want to forecast and direct those trends when we can't really do that either. We don't have a way of predicting the future. And when we do, we often, if we are successful, like if our work is like it's just about the influence you have over the observer. So it's over the subject. So it's the observer effect. The second you actually begin to look at something carefully enough, the subject understands that they are being observed. When you come to your work and when you are designing for others, it is a curious, it's probably one of the reasons that we prefer function over form in a way, is that at least when we tether ourselves to something, which is this has a function, or it's why those groups prefer that. Like there's an argument, if you tether yourself to the idea that it has function ideologically, then whatever it is you're working on, then you can always kind of come back around to the idea that you should be providing a tool or a service. And actually, if your tool and service is a new tool and service, this is fine. It should still be functionally appropriate to the user to be able to use that in a way. When we look at it from a form-based model, I know you asked me about audience last time, and I was like, I do not particularly care about my audience. My audience is secondary. And often I'm not too concerned about the functionality. I'm much more interested in the form of the output because I'm curious as to the response, like whether or not this has value in expressing ideas around our culture, in doing things which will seem much more obvious. And it's something like, it's a very funny thing because I couldn't possibly explain why I don't think I couldn't possibly explain why it matters, but it's quite nice that 10 years on or 5 years on, a lot of the things, the ideas that we were looking at 5 years ago or 10 years ago are now much more reasonable, much more valuable. And actually, in a funny way, I love that none of us are wearing VR headsets, even though it would be like, I can't say that in 10 years' time that won't be a better solution. But right now, like so everything follows its hype cycle. So it's everyone knows Gantner's hype cycles. I mean, I'm going to say, if you don't know Gantner's hype cycles, Gartner's, one should go and look up, you go and look them up, because they're really, really, really useful ways of understanding how almost anything within this world of trend or needs or anything can be followed on a curve of how it is visible and how it is overinflated, and then how actually the reality of that technology or that idea comes through, and then how its progression into the real world is much more slow. So when we talk about form-based ideas, I'm very interested in the things which are not practical, because I think that they will be, but that we are not there yet. And one of the great frustrations about the internet is that things that were really interesting and were possible 5 or 10 years ago, I'm just about to release a deck of all of these ideas, all of these things people were doing 5 or 10 years ago that were very much form-based, that should have been right at the front of would have sold for lots of these ideas, would have been very, very interesting and fun at the moment, aren't possible because of the way in which technology kind of closed itself down and moved behind a controlled experience, behind ecosystems, whether those are social ecosystems. Like, you used to be able to do things with your YouTube page. Like, you used to be able to own those spaces. And now, even if you do have a web page, I mean, my web page is on Squarespace, and it's I can't do half the things I would have done with it 10 years ago. And that's curious to me. It's really curious how we have actually locked down our ability to, or not, maybe it's not that interesting, maybe it's not that curious. It's basically like we've narrowed back down into specialist ability, people who can be paid and controlled, the way in which we can utilize the technology, how we can design with technology. I'm sorry, I know I'm losing myself in here. It's very tricky when you guys ask me questions which are actually really good questions.
No, that was good.
Okay.
I followed, I think.
Okay, good. Thank you.
In a messy way, but I followed it.
You have another question from Rupert. Rupert usually has got amazing kimono, so I don't know, Rupert.
What are you
Now
wearing?
that we've seen the jacquard face of Gaspar, Rupert, show yourself with the kimono.
Sorry, I'm very bored today. I'm just wearing a black t-shirt.
Oh no!
Sorry to disappoint you.
Oh, I mean, this is the only reason why we are reading your question even. We were expecting some kind of show off from your side, but it's fine.
Okay, in that case, okay.
No, I'm joking. It's all good.
Okay, no, I have to.
There we go. Much better.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
I'm going to run out of clothes shortly. You realise this. Yeah, my question was, hi T, thank you. So I missed your first talk. I haven't caught up yet, and you might have spoken about this already. But I've been thinking. I come from the opera world, and I've been thinking a lot about how there's this completely misunderstanding where the opera world and sometimes the theatre world think like the future. They sort of say this very global statement that the future is the digital, without really understanding what that means. And it's quite interesting that sort of the opera world think, like live streaming is sort of like this amazing new thing that is going to change the world, when we all realize that's not the
Well, I love the fact that the Met tried to do that and then crashed their servers 5 days in a row. Despite the fact that they weren't even live after the first day. They were just trying to show a video, and they still crashed it. Like, yep, way to go, guys.
And I'm thinking a lot that one of the biggest problems I have being in the opera industry is that it's like a constantly being in a museum. So the things that you're seeing, even if you're seeing a sort of a new production of an old piece, the information in this piece of music was not written for the people of our time. And I've sort of been thinking a lot in the past years about how we can actually go to the digital to learn actually technically, from the performing arts, how we actually see and interact in our daily lives, which I'd say is a very visual, media-based language. So I'm sort of thinking how maybe the future of making theatre, rather than sort of studying, stage directing or choreography, is actually studying UX or UI design, and then translating that somehow into a new form of theatrical gesture or visual language, sort of like how we can go to the digital to sort of reignite the ephemeral, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do know, actually, exactly, because we're sort of what we're working on a little bit, although so there are 3 things which I've actually written down so I can try and stay on track this time. The first, which is actually a conclusion to, we did just do an AR opera piece with Opera Queensland. We're just doing another project with them at the moment. I've been working on and off with opera and ballet and theatre for 10 years. So yeah, it is a very, very frustrating, it's not frustrating. What am I talking about? None of this is frustrating. What is absolutely wonderful is that no one does anything in these spaces. Not no one, but just like there are structural boundaries, and there are 2 types of structural boundaries that totally restrict. Jenny, really? Jenny, what are you doing? Come up here.
She's just checking to make sure there are no snacks in the bottom of her snack bag.
Really? Okay, can you do it a little less quietly? A little more quietly? Sorry. So there are 2 restrictions. One is the people, and the other is the economic infrastructure. So the first is that almost all the arts are poorly paid and therefore run by people who believe in them very passionately. That belief is, again, an ideology. It's not a real belief. It's not obviously a real belief, but like we can get into belief and value, and that's a whole different philosophical conversation. Fascinating conversation, but a different philosophical conversation. So there's an important difference between the people who hold on to their understanding, their belief of what it is that they are protecting. Very often they are protecting rather than creating. They consider themselves. I remember the tape very specifically saying that they were not there to promote art. They were there to preserve art. And it's like, what a peculiar mental space. And also the other part about this is it's very rarely held at the senior level. So I happened to be in conversation with Nick Swoter, who runs the tape, and was having this conversation with them and going, like, where does that come from? And it isn't from the top. It is actually from the bottom. It's from how people come into this world, into that world. So within the arts, it is very rarely a diktat that this is how the arts work. It means, unfortunately, it's even hard to get organizational buy-in. You do not get the hearts and minds of every individual that works in there, who effectively sees you as a threat, an existential threat, and will therefore fight against you as an existential threat. It's like, okay, I'm not going to get into medical terms, but like it is very much like an immune system fighting against a virus, and there isn't really a way around that. And I don't want to talk about either the digital being the virus or the humans being the immune system, but it is very, very hard to get around. And I think that one should acknowledge that right up front. The second difficult part, the obstacle part to the things that you're talking about, or all of the work we do, is that there is an economic infrastructure to the arts. It is very fragile at the best of times. Currently, it's even more fragile. Not sure whether this helps it or hinders it, but they don't have the money to do the thing that might go wrong. Very few companies have the money to do the thing that might go wrong, because pretty much everyone works on quite narrow overheads, obviously, especially within the arts. The idea that and then it seems bizarre, but no one has the money to do something that to experiment, to explore, to create. It's bizarre, but actually you can explore and experiment and create within the parameters of something which you know works, and that's that's very significant. So they tend to stay within the parameters of something that works, and that's actually one of the few reasons that like I think our work is so like unusual in a way, in that we come along and we go, well, we will basically pay for the experiment, and let's see what happens. And also you can put your name to it or not. I know I showed you a ballet project with the Royal Ballet, which I don't think will go any further because they're not comfortable with it. I'm not sure they're comfortable with me showing it, but I'm going to I show it repeatedly, and I will wait for them to tell me to stop. A lot of decisions, a lot of things people say, a lot of the legal that happens is based on a risk, and the risk is that you will get sued. They were sued by someone else for doing something else, and again, it's so unlikely. In like they apply kind of economic law to like the as if it's big business to little arts organizations, and it's like So those are your two existing restrictions to why we're not using the skills. The other is that so they have no interest in hearing from us. You have very, very little crossover between those two places in terms of humans talking to other humans and economic interests matching with economic interests. So there aren't that many developers employed by theatre groups. It's a great shame. It would be really nice if there were. I would love creative technologists to be kind of first and foremost. There are, however, small groups. It is a small group. It's people like yourselves that can do interesting things. And then you come up against other interesting challenges, one of which is sound, which, as you can probably tell from this very talk, does not work fluently around the world, and why both live streaming is challenging and certainly synchronizing is challenging, because whilst amazingly the internet having done this extraordinary thing of us all being able to see each other, there's a little bit of me which thinks that must be more information surely than the sound. And yet we can all see each other on live stream, but we can't synchronize the sound on live stream. And that might happen one day, might be something that we manage to sort out. But at the moment, it's just wild watching the stuff that we're having to hack together to try and even synchronize remote actors performing simultaneously that can be streamed to YouTube, and which also allows a certain level of interactivity. So that thing about allowing, the third part of your thing, which is about allowing interactivity, is also fascinatingly hard to do before you even begin to kind of make it less tacky than it normally is. There's kids stuff at the moment where the television is becoming much more interactive. It's really curious watching my boys assume that some of their TV shows are interactive, and it not being a problem. They're perfectly comfortable with that. And then I think that there's the virtual interface. Sorry, Rupert, it's too big a question. So the last part, which actually answers the previous question as well, which is that actually when you get into VR, these experiences can be incredibly rich. And I think that in the, well, what will we call it? The second, the third, the fourth coming of VR, which will probably be about 5 to 10 years away, you'll find that the social quality of VR is going to be very, very rich. This experience that we're having right now becomes very different when, rather than staring at a small screen, we are actually technically in the same space. And then then these conversations and these performative things, they all do become very different when we are able to exist in a kind of sort of a simultaneous virtual space. So that's for me is the very interesting part. What I like is that I basically looked at it this time and was like, nowhere near there yet, and we are still left with the people who can use the technology making things that they can do with the technology, which is retrograde. There's just no economic imperative to putting them with the artists who don't want to use the technology. Sorry, that's the challenge. Good luck with that. Hope you can fix it.
I'm sure that with your amazing kimono, Rupert, you will be able to fix any issues in this world.
I hope so.
Is there any more questions? Because we only have 8 minutes left with wonderful tea. So, you know, if there is anyone that wants to ask a burning question, it's now or never. I mean, it sounds a bit negative what I'm saying here. I mean, now and maybe not today. You know, it's Earth Day today. Do you know it's Earth Day? T, actually, for you, it's going to be tomorrow, isn't it? Can you hear me?
We've had Earth Day. You're having Earth Day. We're ahead of you.
Yes.
Just finished.
So how was your Earth Day? What did you do for Earth Day? I mean, I would love to know, because like right now you were talking about the live situation. You know, I'm supposed to be live right now on a conversation, but of course it's all fake. It all was recorded before. Talking about Earth Day. I'm eager to know what sort of thought process you had on Earth Day, and where does Earth Day even come from? Do you know?
Yeah, it's the 30th. Oh no, it's the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. It's a big day for Earth Day. And it's really tragic because it should be a huge moment for that entire movement. And it's, you know, totally lost. There is no news cycle in the world that will cover the fact that it's 50 years since we began to realize that there was an environmental crisis brewing. And I did think about it today. I was like, wow, what's weird about it was the only things I saw about it was celebrating Earth Day. It's like, we shouldn't need Earth Day. We certainly shouldn't be celebrating that for 50 years we've failed to acknowledge that there's a crisis and take action. Also, just curious, which is like, where does a radical movement go from here? When this is radical, what we're seeing now, and we're seeing it because people are in fear of their lives, and they still don't want to do it. So what is going to be required to make these kind of sacrifices, and they're not dissimilar sacrifices. It's like, you know, when the meat industry packs up, that kind of sacrifice, when we have no air travel. I'm not sure, there's some other interesting things that would be curious to see, but it's like, it's this sort of level of sacrifice, right? Mm-hmm. So I have no idea how on earth, having had a taste of what might what it might require to save the planet, I think no one's going to want to save the planet. That's my problem. That's what I think. And I just think it was really tragic that we were celebrating Earth Day. That was my only thoughts. No, mainly today I slept in the garden because I've got a nice pouchy thing out there, and it's just that last bit of time of year where it's nice and warm but not too warm. So I've just been sleeping.